Northeast of the Sioux, there lies a wide sweep of virgin pine woods. It is the Mississagi Provincial Forest. In May 1948, the long black arm of human carelessness that causes 9 out of 10 forest fires reached into this green timberland and set it ablaze. And the blaze grew, fanned by hot, dry winds, and became a roaring, raging, greedy inferno. For 2 months it lashed through these green northlands, laughing at the men who strained night and day to control it. Half a million acres gone, and a great silence fell upon the land. It was the stillness of emptiness where nothing lived. In Toronto, the Minister of Lands and Forests held an urgent meeting to discuss timber salvage in the area. $230 million feet of white pine, 81 million feet of red pine, and millions of feet of jack pine and spruce were estimated to have been in that area. Some of this timber would be left standing. Harold Scott, Minister of Lands and Forests, demanded action. Millions of boring insects would soon attack the good trees. So the tremendous job of salvage began. The Department of Lands and Forests went into action at once. It was time for speed. Crews and aircraft were detailed for photographic duty, for the whole area had to be mapped out carefully. It was necessary to know the condition, quality, amount, and accessibility of the scorched but standing timber. They processed the air photos quickly, and when they were ready, they were forwarded to experienced foresters who moved into the woods with caliper and compass, marking the salvageable areas. Those areas which could be saved were marked on each photo. The district forester, a busy man whose job was to coordinate the work of many crews in the salvage operation, checked the findings of the foresters, making certain that the photographs contained all possible information. Once the details were checked, the photographs were sent by air to Toronto, where skilled map workers translated their details to a master map. Lumbermen hesitated. It was a big gamble. They agreed to work for the department. They, too, had to act fast. There was much to be done, and already the scorched woods beckoned for action. Their time was drawing close. For on the scene appeared woodpeckers, warning woodsmen that wood-destroying worms were beginning their deadly attacks. In a short time, these insects could eat the hearts out of sound trees. Action wasn't long in coming. Heavy bulldozers smashed their way into the burned woods, closely followed by the operators, who picked out sites for their mills and camps. Work on the mills was started as soon as possible, and 40 below zero weather only slowed the work slightly. Forms were built, equipment brought in, cement was poured, for the mills had to be ready. At the same time, logging began to supply the material for the mills and camps. Expert woodsmen sent their axes deep into the pine wood. They were husky Ontario woodsmen, these lumberjacks, equal to the task, conscious that on their brawn, speed, and skill much depended. It took them only minutes to chop and cut through some of the biggest pines in Ontario. It took minutes, too, to measure a log, slice it through with a flashing saw, and move on to the next one. The department scalers measured and checked the logs as fast as they were cut. In all logging operations on Crown lands, both lumbermen and the Crown itself must pay a royalty for each log cut to the people of Ontario for the privilege of cutting in public-owned forests. As the logs were harvested, the work of moving them went on. Sleighs were loaded by horse-drawn jammers. All available equipment was put to use. The efficient and spectacular drop loaders helped to speed up the work of piling timber on the sleighs for the ride to mill and stockpile. Logs, proud members of Ontario's virgin forest land, salvaged from the ravages of fire. And they were hauled quickly over the rough bush roads. Water-filled sleighs laid a pavement of ice to speed their passage, and the forest rode to the mill. The useful jack pine was soon sliced into railway ties. Jack pine is the first wood to be attacked by boring insects. It was cut and shipped first. But jack pine wasn't only cut for ties. From jack pine came the lumber that would clothe the big mills to come. Mills that would saw the more valuable red and white pine for the market. The big mills were soon running, ready to bite into the white pine salvaged from the burned wilderness. And those pine logs arrived, scorched outside, but with sound and solid hearts. The logs were frozen through and could not be sawed, as the frozen wood caused the band saws to deflect. Sections of the lake were boarded off and heated by blasts of live steam shot into the water. Even in below zero weather, the water was too hot for human hands. The logs were soon thawed enough for cutting. and the lumber came out of the mill straight and true, saved from the burned land. No time was wasted shipping lumber. Men and materials were needed to bring the logs out of the bush, so the giant stockpiles grew. And on the lake and river, thousands of logs awaited the spring thaw that would send them tumbling into water where they would be safe from the destructive insects. Back in camp, the men relaxed, tired after a busy day, and life was good. And behind the scenes, the inner man was being looked after, for hardy bushmen are a hungry lot. It's chow time in the bush. Then spring released the frozen waters of the Mississagi. But the beautiful Aubrey Falls was a menace. Its jagged rocks had splintered and smashed countless logs before. To bypass this obstacle, loggers had built a gigantic wooden flume over a mile long to carry the precious wood safely. The river driver had to guide the logs straight into the flume. There was no room for error, for if one log turned sideways and jammed, the pileup would smash the thin sides of the flume. And there was danger on the river, too. Those heavy logs could come up under river drivers' boats and crush them easily. But the drive was on. Logs had to be dragged into the stream and sent on their way. In icy cold water up to their hips, the river drivers pushed and hauled the great logs. They worked with pike pole and peavey to get them back into the swirling Mississagi. It was hard, dangerous work, needing constant vigilance. For when things started, they had to move fast. Those holes let water out, for in logging, there's no place for heavy feet. Braving the treacherous waters in their pointers, Ontario's river drivers are heroes of our Northland. Danger is in their blood, and it lies around every turn of the river, every grinding log, and every hidden rock. One mistake could mean death. One dropped oar, destruction. Down the river, bulldozers came to help the drivers. Their power made short work of the masses of logs that piled up on shore. Center jams called for drastic action to get them on the move again. The answer? Dynamite. Expertly placed to give the most telling force, dynamite blasted the knot of jammed logs, loosening their grip on each other, setting them free at last, on their march to the mill. From the mill, the next problem was the market, for the Department of Lands and Forests had the responsibility of selling millions of feet of choice pine lumber in a way that would not flood the market. Great concentration yards were built at North Bay, where the lumber was sent out through regular trade channels. By spring of 1950, the Department of Lands and Forests had salvaged 200 million feet of lumber in the form of logs. Soon the salvaged lumber began to pour into the concentration yard, where it was stacked in great piles. By June 1950, a shortage of dressed lumber was being felt in the great cities of Ontario, and the gap was filled. And throughout Ontario, much construction was in progress. Warehouses, factories, schools, whose building depended on lumber, were springing up across the province. Lumber for beams, lumber for trusses, lumber for forms were needed, and the burned forest supplied it. Out of the smoke and destruction came millions of feet of Ontario pine lumber. Lumber for homes, whole roads, whole streets, whole towns. The burned land gave up to salvage enough sound lumber to build more than 16,000 homes. This is the spectacular story of a war against destruction, carried out under great odds, saved as part of its duty to the people of Ontario, owners of our forests. It is the fulfilling of the responsibility to Ontario by its own men of the woods, the Department of Lands and Forests, who brought homes from out of the smoke.